Do you feel like something is missing in your life, like Teresa void that you can't quite fill? Perhaps you've been searching for love in all the wrong places, or maybe you've been hurt in the past and slowly lost hope in finding someone who will truly love and accept you for who you are. If so, listen closely, because psychology teaches us something powerful about human connection. The people who affect us most deeply are often feeling the same emotional pull long before anything is spoken aloud. And right now, someone special is carrying feelings for you far more seriously than you realize. Yes, really, someone known has been waiting for the right moment to reveal what has been growing inside them. Not a temporary attraction, not surface-level interest, something deeper, something emotional, something that has stayed with them quietly over time. And whether you fully notice it yet or not, this person has already begun imagining a future with you in ways they never expected. Prepare yourself emotionally, because someone wants to step into your life in a serious way. Someone wants to take your hand and build something lasting. A relationship based not only on attraction, but on peace, support, trust, and emotional safety. This person sees you differently from everyone else. They notice the things most people overlook. The way you continue showing kindness even after disappointment. The way you carry emotional strength quietly. The way your eyes soften when you care deeply about someone. The way you try to stay strong even when life feels heavy inside. Psychologists often say we become deeply attached to people who make us feel emotionally safe enough to be ourselves. And that is exactly what has happened here. Somewhere along the way, your presence became comforting to them. Familiar grounding. They started associating you with peace. At first, they may not even have understood why. Because meaningful emotional attachment rarely arrives loudly in the beginning. It builds slowly through moments, conversations, energy, presence. The human mind becomes attached to consistency, emotional warmth, and the feeling of being truly understood. And over time, you became that feeling for them. This person may already exist somewhere in your life. Maybe they have known you for a long time but never fully confessed how deeply they feel. Maybe they have stayed quiet out of fear of rejection, fear of ruining the connection, or fear that their emotions might not be returned. Or perhaps this is someone newer whose arrival into your life will feel strangely familiar from the beginning, as though your energy recognizes each other naturally. But one thing is becoming clear inside them. You no longer feel temporary. That realization changes people. Because once someone emotionally connects with another person on a deeper level, the mind begins imagining permanence without even trying. Suddenly they start picturing ordinary life with you. Quiet mornings, long conversations, supporting each other through difficult seasons, building something stable together instead of constantly searching elsewhere. That is what makes this connection different. This person is not simply fascinated by you. They feel emotionally drawn toward you in a way they cannot easily explain. And psychology explains why this happens. Human beings naturally seek emotional security. We move toward people who make us feel seen without judgment, heard without performance, understood without needing to constantly explain ourselves. Those rare connections activate something powerful in the human mind: safety, attachment, trust. That is why your energy stays in their thoughts long after conversations end. That is why your absence feels heavier than it should. That is why certain memories involving you replay in their mind unexpectedly. You became emotionally significant to them. And lately, those feelings have only been growing stronger. At night, they think about you more than they admit. They replay interactions. They wonder whether you notice the emotional tension between you. They imagine what life would feel like if they fully allowed themselves to love you openly. And at the same time, fear exists too, because meaningful connection creates vulnerability. The deeper the feeling, the greater the emotional risk. That is why they may appear careful sometimes, hesitant, quiet, thoughtful in ways they were not before, not because they feel uncertain about you, but because they are becoming aware of how much you actually matter to them. There is another reason this connection feels important. You represent something emotionally rare in their life. Not drama, not confusion, not emotional games, peace. And people who have experienced emotional instability often become deeply attached to those who bring calm into their nervous system. Your presence has become associated with comfort for them. Safety, stability, relief from emotional exhaustion. That is difficult to replace once it is experienced genuinely. You may have spent a long time believing love would continue disappointing you. Maybe you became emotionally tired of temporary attention that never turned into commitment. Maybe you started protecting your heart so carefully that part of you stopped expecting something serious altogether. But this connection carries different energy, because the person moving closer to you is not searching for entertainment. They are searching for belonging, and without fully realizing it, they have started associating that feeling with you. That is why your conversations feel different. That is why eye contact sometimes feels heavier. That is why silence between you may feel strangely emotional instead of awkward. Human connection operates far beneath words long before feelings are confessed openly. Body language changes. Emotional focus changes. Attention deepens. Small details become unforgettable. And somewhere along the way, you became unforgettable to them. The interesting part is this. The more they try to suppress these feelings, the stronger the emotional attachment seems to grow. Psychology calls this emotional reinforcement. When someone repeatedly thinks about a person connected to comfort, longing, peace, or emotional meaning, the brain strengthens that emotional pathway over time. That is why certain people become harder to forget instead of easier. And you are becoming that person for them, not because you forced it, not because you chased it, but because emotional depth naturally leaves stronger impressions than temporary attraction ever can. This person wants more than moments with you, more than occasional affection, more than emotional convenience. They are beginning to imagine partnership, real partnership. The kind where two people grow together emotionally instead of draining each other constantly. The kind where honesty matters, loyalty matters, presence matters. The kind of connection many people secretly want but rarely find. And even though they may not have fully spoken these feelings aloud yet, internally something has already shifted. They are no longer asking themselves whether you matter. Now they are wondering whether they are brave enough to finally reveal how deeply they feel. Because deep down, they already know one truth clearly. Life has not felt the same since you entered it. If this resonates with your heart, comment "I am open to real love." And write 222 below if you believe meaningful connections enter our lives for a reason. A long time, this person convinced themselves they could control what they feel for you. They believed they could stay calm, stay logical, stay emotionally distant enough to avoid becoming vulnerable. At first they tried treating the connection casually. They told themselves they were only interested, only curious, only emotionally drawn to you for a short season. But something unexpected happened. Instead of fading, the feelings became stronger. Psychology explains this clearly. The human mind becomes emotionally attached through repetition, emotional safety, and significance. When someone consistently occupies your thoughts, affects your emotions deeply, and creates a sense of comfort your nervous system recognizes as rare, attachment naturally grows. And that is exactly what has happened inside them. Without even realizing it, they started emotionally organizing parts of their life around you. Your messages affected their mood. Your attention affected their energy. Your silence affected their peace. That level of emotional influence frightened them. Because meaningful attachment always carries risk. The more someone matters, the more vulnerable the heart becomes. And vulnerability is difficult for people who have spent years protecting themselves emotionally. This person may have experienced disappointment before. They may have trusted the wrong people, opened their heart to connections that eventually hurt them. Over time, many people learn to protect themselves by staying emotionally guarded. They become careful about how much they reveal, careful about becoming too attached, careful about needing someone too deeply. But then you appeared, and suddenly their emotional defenses stopped working the same way. You made them feel things they thought they had outgrown. Hope, peace, emotional excitement. the quiet desire to build something real instead of temporary. That terrified them more than they expected. Because once someone starts imagining permanence with another person, the possibility of loss becomes real too. That is why there have been moments where they seemed conflicted. Moments where their energy felt close one day and distant the next. Moments where they clearly cared, yet still held something back emotionally. It was never because they felt nothing. It was because they felt too much too quickly. The deeper the feelings became, the more careful they became emotionally. And here is something important you need to understand. People often pull back emotionally, not when they stop caring, but when they realize how deeply they already care. That realization changes behavior. Suddenly every interaction feels more important. Every misunderstanding feels heavier. Every possibility of rejection feels more dangerous. That is the emotional stage they have been trapped inside. They want closeness with you. But they are also afraid of what happens if this connection becomes serious and then falls apart. Because psychology teaches us that humans fear emotional loss more intensely than emotional gain. We naturally try protecting ourselves from pain before fully allowing ourselves happiness. And your connection with this person has reached a point where happiness and vulnerability now exist side by side. Still, no matter how much they try controlling these feelings, your presence continues affecting them. They notice you in crowded rooms immediately. Their attention shifts toward you naturally. Small details about you stay in their memory longer than they should. Even ordinary moments involving you somehow feel emotionally significant to them. That is one of the clearest signs of deep emotional attachment. When someone becomes psychologically important, the brain assigns greater emotional value to even the smallest interactions involving them. Your smile lingers in their mind. Your voice calms them unexpectedly. Certain phrases you once said replay in quiet moments. Even your silence affects them emotionally. And the strangest part is this: the more they tried suppressing the connection, the stronger it seemed to grow. Because emotionally meaningful attachment rarely disappears through avoidance alone. Distance sometimes intensifies emotional focus instead of weakening it. That is why they have spent so much time internally battling themselves. Part of them wants to fully step toward you emotionally. Another part fears getting hurt if they do. And lately, that inner conflict has become exhausting for them. They are tired of pretending your impact is small, tired of acting emotionally unaffected, tired of carrying feelings they can barely explain to themselves anymore. There have been nights where they lay awake, replaying your conversations, moments where they suddenly miss you intensely even after trying to distract themselves all day. Moments where they realize no other connection feels emotionally comparable anymore. That realization changed everything. Because now, they understand this connection is no longer casual. It matters deeply. And once the human heart accepts emotional significance, pretending becomes much harder. Psychologists often describe this as emotional dissonance. When someone's actions no longer match their true feelings internally, emotional pressure begins building. Eventually, something has to change. Either the feelings must be expressed honestly, or the emotional tension becomes unbearable. That is where this person is slowly arriving now. At the edge of emotional honesty, they are beginning to realize silence cannot continue forever, especially because your absence affects them more than they expected. When you become distant emotionally, they feel it immediately. When your attention shifts elsewhere, it unsettles them. When they imagine the possibility of losing access to your presence permanently, anxiety begins surfacing inside them in ways they cannot ignore. Because deep down, they already know something important. You are no longer replaceable to them emotionally, and that truth is changing the way they think about the future. Before, they may have approached relationships casually. Now they find themselves imagining stability, consistency, commitment. The idea of building something lasting instead of temporary. You awaken that desire inside them, not through pressure, not through manipulation, but through emotional depth. Real connection naturally changes people. It makes them reflect differently, choose differently, dream differently. and that transformation has already begun inside them. But there is still one fear they have not fully conquered yet. The fear that you may not feel the same, because as their emotions grow stronger, so does the emotional risk. Now they are no longer afraid of simply getting hurt. They are afraid of losing the possibility of you. That fear keeps them cautious sometimes, keeps them emotionally restrained, keeps them watching for signs before fully exposing their heart. Maybe lately you have noticed them paying closer attention to your reactions, watching your energy carefully, searching your words for emotional reassurance. That is not accidental. When someone begins falling deeply, they naturally start looking for emotional safety before revealing vulnerability fully. And recently, something happened that gave them hope. A moment, a sign, a shift in your energy that made them begin believing these feelings may actually be returned. That moment changed the emotional balance completely, because once hope enters the heart, fear slowly begins losing its power. And write 333 below if you believe emotional connection is stronger than temporary attraction. The moment that changed everything for them did not look dramatic on the outside. There were no fireworks, no perfect movie scene, no loud confession, just one small moment that stayed in their mind far longer than it should have. And yet, psychologically, moments like these are often the ones that create the deepest emotional shifts, because human attachment is rarely built through grand gestures alone. It is built through emotional meaning attached to ordinary experiences. For them, that moment involved you. Maybe it was the way you looked at them during a quiet conversation. Maybe it was how naturally you understood something they never fully explained. Maybe it was the softness in your voice when you spoke to them. Or maybe it was simply the realization that being around you felt emotionally safe in a way they had not experienced before. Whatever the exact moment was, something inside them changed afterward, because suddenly they started asking themselves a dangerous question. What if this connection is real, not temporary, not imagined? Real. That question stayed with them long after the moment ended. Psychologists often explain that emotional certainty usually arrives slowly. The brain searches for patterns, emotional consistency, and signs of mutual connection before fully accepting vulnerability. And little by little, your actions began giving them those signs. They noticed how your energy softened around them, how conversations between you carried emotional depth naturally, how silence with you did not feel uncomfortable, how even small interactions somehow carried emotional weight afterward. That is when their fear slowly started turning into hope, and hope changes everything. Because once someone begins believing their feelings may actually be returned, emotional resistance weakens. The walls they once relied on emotionally begin collapsing from the inside. That is exactly what has been happening to them. Now they catch themselves thinking about future moments involving you without even trying, imagining places they want to take you, imagining introducing you to important people in their life, imagining building routines beside you. The human mind only does this when emotional attachment has become serious. You are no longer just someone they like. You are becoming someone they mentally include in their future. And that realization has made their emotions even more intense. Because now the connection feels emotionally important in two directions. Not only are they emotionally attached to you, they are beginning to suspect you may feel something too. That possibility has kept them awake at night more than once. There are moments where they replay conversations with you repeatedly, searching for hidden meaning inside your words. Moments where they wonder whether certain looks between you carried more emotion than either of you admitted aloud. Moments where they question whether your heart has already started moving toward them quietly too. And honestly, part of them already believes it has. Because emotional chemistry is difficult to fake over time. Humans subconsciously mirror emotional energy when genuine connection exists. Eye contact lingers longer, attention sharpens naturally. Emotional awareness increases, small changes in mood become noticeable immediately. They have noticed these things with you, and it has affected them deeply. The strange thing is, even when they try focusing elsewhere, their mind keeps returning to you. Psychologists call this emotional salience. When someone becomes emotionally significant, the brain prioritizes them automatically. Thoughts involving that person become more emotionally charged and difficult to ignore. That is why your name suddenly appears in their thoughts at random moments throughout the day. A song reminds them of you. A quiet moment makes them miss you unexpectedly. Certain conversations feel incomplete without your presence. Even their emotional state shifts depending on how connected they feel to you. That level of emotional influence does not happen casually, and now they know it. That realization is why their behavior may feel different lately. More intentional, more emotionally aware, more careful, because they are no longer treating this connection lightly inside themselves. You matter too much now. There have been moments recently where they almost told you everything. Moments where the truth sat right at the edge of their words. But vulnerability still frightens them sometimes. Not because they doubt what they feel, because they know exactly what they feel now. The fear comes from how much emotional power you already hold in their life. When someone becomes emotionally important enough to affect your peace, your thoughts, your future, and your emotional stability, confessing those feelings suddenly feels incredibly serious. Because now there is something meaningful to lose. That is why they hesitate before certain messages, why they overthink simple conversations, why they sometimes appear emotionally intense one moment and restrained the next. Internally, they are trying to manage emotions that keep growing stronger than their ability to contain them, and lately, the emotional pressure has become difficult to hide, especially after one particular realization changed their perspective completely. They started imagining what life would feel like if someone else eventually took their place in your life. That thought unsettled them deeply, more deeply than they expected. Because for the first time, they realized this connection is no longer emotionally optional to them. The idea of losing the possibility of you now genuinely hurts. And pain reveals attachment very quickly. Psychology teaches us that people often understand the depth of their feelings through fear of loss. When the mind emotionally reacts to the possibility of someone disappearing permanently, it exposes how psychologically significant that person has already become. That is what happened here. Suddenly, they were no longer asking themselves whether they cared. Now, they were asking themselves whether they might lose you if they remained silent too long. That fear has been pushing them toward emotional honesty slowly. And the closer they move toward honesty, the harder it becomes to continue pretending this is casual. Because deep down, they already know something important. You changed them emotionally. You made them believe meaningful love may still exist. You made them imagine emotional stability instead of emotional chaos. You made them want something deeper than temporary attraction. And those realizations cannot easily be reversed once they settle into the heart. Now even the people around them are starting to notice changes. They seem more thoughtful, more emotionally serious, more reflective than before. That happens when someone begins emotionally preparing themselves for something meaningful. Without even realizing it, they are slowly becoming emotionally available in ways they never expected. And the most powerful part, they are beginning to understand that this connection may not simply be about attraction at all. It may be about emotional compatibility, peace, trust, partnership, the kind of connection capable of lasting beyond excitement. That realization changes the entire emotional experience. Because now they are not just thinking about whether you make them happy. They are thinking about whether you are the person they could truly build a life beside. And for the first time, in a long time, the answer inside them feels frighteningly clear. Yes, but before they fully reveal those feelings, one final emotional breakthrough still needs to happen. One final fear still needs to collapse. Because there is something they have not told anyone yet, a private emotional realization, so strong it completely changed the way they see your future together. And once that realization fully settles inside them, silence may no longer be possible. In the next part, you will hear the emotional turning point that finally convinces them they cannot keep hiding these feelings any longer, the moment where love becomes stronger than fear. And write 444 below if you believe meaningful connections always find their way back to truth. The emotional turning point arrived quietly, not during some dramatic conversation, not during a perfect romantic moment, but alone in silence. Because sometimes the biggest realizations happen when there are no distractions left to hide behind. Lately, this person has been trying to continue life normally. They work, speak, laugh, and carry on like everyone else around them. But internally, something keeps pulling their attention back toward you again and again, and no matter how hard they try distracting themselves, your presence remains emotionally louder than everything else. That frightened them at first, because psychology teaches us that the more emotionally meaningful a person becomes, the more impossible it feels to emotionally detach from them without losing part of ourselves in the process. And somewhere along the way, your connection stopped feeling optional to them emotionally. You became important. Deeply important, not only because of attraction, but because of how they feel when they are emotionally connected to you, safe, grounded, understood. And once the human mind associates another person with emotional peace, attachment naturally deepens over time. That is exactly what happened here. There came a night recently where they sat alone replaying everything in their mind, every conversation, every moment of closeness, every unfinished sentence, every emotional pause between you that somehow carried more meaning than words themselves. And suddenly one realization became impossible for them to ignore anymore. They are already emotionally invested in you far beyond what they originally intended. That truth hit them hard, because for months they may have tried calling this curiosity, interest, chemistry, timing, anything except what it really is, love growing quietly. And now they can no longer deny it, not after the way your absence affects them, not after the way their mood changes depending on your energy, not after realizing they compare every other connection to the emotional depth they feel with you. That comparison changed everything, because no matter how many distractions entered their life, nothing emotionally replaced your presence, and psychologically, that matters. Human beings naturally move toward experiences that emotionally regulate them. When someone consistently brings emotional calm, emotional excitement, emotional understanding, and emotional safety all at once, the brain begins forming a strong emotional bond around that person. That bond is now fully forming inside them. And lately, they have started imagining something they once avoided completely: commitment. Real commitment, not temporary connection, not casual emotional closeness, something lasting. The strange thing is, they never planned for this. They never expected one person to quietly shift their emotional world this deeply. But now they find themselves thinking about futures they once avoided imagining. Thinking about stability, thinking about building a peaceful life beside someone, instead of constantly chasing emotional intensity. And every future thought somehow keeps leading back to you. That realization became overwhelming. Because now the fear is no longer, what if I get hurt? Now the fear is, what if I lose the chance to experience something real because I stayed silent too long? That question has been haunting them lately, especially during quiet moments, especially at night, especially when they imagine you eventually emotionally moving on without ever fully knowing how deeply they feel. That thought creates genuine emotional anxiety inside them now, because for the first time, they are beginning to understand the cost of emotional hesitation. And here is something important psychology reveals. People usually delay emotional honesty for two reasons: fear of rejection or fear of emotional change. This person is carrying both, because if they confess what they feel, life changes permanently afterward. The emotional safety of silence disappears. The emotional risk becomes real. But at the same time, remaining silent is beginning to feel unbearable too. That internal pressure is building stronger every day now. You may already feel the shift yourself. Perhaps their attention feels more focused lately. Perhaps their energy around you feels heavier emotionally. Perhaps you sense unspoken words sitting beneath ordinary conversations. That is not your imagination. That is emotional truth trying to rise to the surface. They are struggling to continue pretending your impact is small, because your impact is no longer small at all. You changed their emotional priorities without even realizing it. You made them value emotional depth over emotional games. You made them crave consistency instead of temporary excitement. You made them realize peace can actually feel more powerful than chaos. That emotional transformation is rare, and now they are terrified of losing the connection responsible for it. Recently, someone close to them noticed this change directly. They were asked a simple question: "Why do you seem different lately?" At first they avoided answering honestly, but eventually they admitted something quietly.